Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello and welcome to the GAA podcast. Mikey Stafford here. I hope you're all very well. The Hurling League is upon us, so we're dispensing with any talk of big ball this week. Don't worry about that. It'll just be pure hurling with pure hurling folk like we have Denis Walsh from the Sunday Times, Jackie Tyrrell from Kilkenny, you may have heard of them, and Ursula Jacob from the Wexford Camogie all-conquering team of the last decade. How are we all doing, guys?
Good, Mikey.
Good, Mikey. How are you?
I'm all right. I was just saying earlier I broke my toe, but it's not a fun story and it's not heroic, so I won't go into it. There's no daring do or anything. I'm just limping around the place like an idiot, but I'm fine. But I won't be lining out for Wexford this weekend, Ursula. I'm sorry. I'm not.
You better let Davey know.
I know he'll be first Paddy Foley and now me. He's losing his stars at a rate of knots here. So as we'll crack on into it, we have a couple of interviews on the RT website today. One with Sean Finn and one with Dermot O'Keefe. Sean Finn of the all-conquering Limerick 3-in-a-row league chasing team. He says, I didn't pick up a hurl till April, didn't feel the need to, whereas D. O'Keefe said the Wexford lads were mad to get back on New Year's Day, but obviously the pandemic kind of stopped them from doing that. Jackie, as a man who used to play for an all-conquering team, I'm guessing a shorter pre-season is an easier thing to live with if you've won all around you the year before, whereas if you're a team like Wexford who are coming off a disappointing year, this talk of, short pre-season, we don't mind it as grand, sure, we're all fit enough, it doesn't really wash, does it?
No, it doesn't, and it's probably two players and two teams are, had completely different years. Wexford limped out the championship very early, whereas Limerick were there till the bitter end and were All-Ireland champions in December. So it's kind of refreshing to hear Sean Finn saying he didn't pick up a hurl until April, and I'm sure he enjoyed Christmas in January and February, whereas the Wexford lads were probably chomping at the bit. But it's I suppose it's in 5 years is a long time in the inter-county game, and players are just in such immaculate condition. Pre-season, it's not really a pre-season. It's probably, before it was probably 1 or 2 months of hard slog. I don't even think they really need to do that anymore. You see the shape they're in. So they hit the ground pretty well as soon as they get back. It's more about freshness now probably for Limerick, and probably for Wexford it's maybe about holding them back a bit, because we've seen what happened last year with the club campaign, and they played football and hurling, and then they did a long run into the championship, and their championship performances were just flat. There was no real, you couldn't really put your finger on why they were so bad, other than maybe they were overtrained, or maybe they lacked that bit of freshness. Limerick, on the other hand, seemed to be just going from strength to strength from the very first round. When they kicked in the second half against Clare, they were just imperious for the rest of the year. Yeah.
Denis, I suppose down your direction, well, you could see Cork being another team who could be at risk of maybe trying a little too hard, going, maybe a bit too much work too early in the year, and the risk is that you do a Wexford on it, as we're going to call it from here, then that you peak too early in the season. And while we're all glad the Allianz League is back, for most Division 1 teams, it's not really what they're thinking about. It's not the silverware they're looking to lift, because there might be no silverware this year for a start.
Well, sure. I mean, obviously Cork have a world of issues, Mikey. It was funny actually. Kevin Donovan, who's the Cork CEO, mentioned in his report at convention in December that maybe Cork need to take a different attitude to the league. They had more than 23 years, and not paying the league as much attention as other counties hadn't done Cork any great favours. He was the argument he was making. But look, Cork have so many things to address, and so many structural issues to address in the team, that the next 5-6 weeks are hugely important for Cork, because it's not going to be the same Cork team we saw last November and October. There's been some serious culling over the winter, and there's going to be some new faces, and they're going to try guys who were on the Cork under 20 teams in recent years. So look, it is an important 5-6 weeks. Like there's a couple of new guys involved in the backroom team. Obviously Donal O'Grady is there. The defence, which will be Donal's big, Donal he's a great coach, full stop, but he'd be terrific. He's terrific with defences and with defenders, and so it'll be interesting to see now what kind of a defence Cork come out with, because that really has been a kind of an Achilles heel for the last few years, just not strong enough in defence.
Yeah, and it's it has been a problem, and people have, you know, said for a couple of years, oh, we need a new three, you know, we need a full back, we need a halfback, you know, centre halfback. But Cork have, you know, if you talk about that spine through the middle, they've lost the goalkeeper and they've lost a few more lads who would have played 3 and 6, maybe not in the last season or two, but, you know, when you look at Aidan Walsh and you know, these lads who are gone, there's an awful lot of experience gone. And from, as you say, midfield on, you could say Cork are a match for most teams, but it has been the defence for the last few years, and they may not have been starters, they may not have been first choice, apart from Anthony Nash, obviously, but they were experienced, they were key players to have around when you're bringing in those under 20s. So there's a lot of the kind of that kind of backup you'd want is gone, isn't it?
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, in terms of experience at the back, actually Owen Cadigan is still there, even though Owen didn't get much of a look in last year. Wouldn't be surprised to see him getting a few games during the league. I mean, if he gets an injury-free run, I think they still have confidence in him. There's a suggestion, I think there's every possibility that Mark Coleman will play number 6 in a kind of a Declan Hannon style number 6, where he's not actually marking anybody, but just kind of picking up that space and driving on from there. I mean, he's a brilliant man to pass the ball, and you know, he's a brilliant mover. I mean, he's everything really. I mean, he wouldn't be a traditional number 6, but the way the game has gone, and as I say, like Declan Hannon doesn't pick up anybody. Limerick kind of make sure that he's able to sit in the pocket and be a kind of a spare man. And I think there's every chance that Cork will try Mark Coleman in that role.
Yeah. We won't go through team by team here by any means, Ursula, but I do think Cork are kind of an interesting case, because, you know, obviously there was lots of promise there a couple of years ago that, you know, they really looked at they were going to push on, and there was, you know, hope to end that the All-Ireland kind of what you'd call it a famine down there, Denis. Most of us wouldn't quite call it that, but by Cork standards. But Ursula didn't quite turn out that way last year, as it was for Wexford and for other counties, because of the nature of the championship was a bit of a flop. So, you know, there is pressure on Cork this year, I think, too. They might be one team who maybe need that momentum in the league.
And I suppose even since the championship draw, one of the kind of talking points was that, you know, Cork are facing Limerick, and a lot of people outside of Cork, and maybe even Cork people, feel that they actually could really put it up to Limerick, because we have seen in recent years, you know, a couple of years ago, you know, Cork had lost against Tipperary in the opening round of the Munster Championship, and then they went and played Limerick the next day and got the victory. So it's probably not a bad stage to get Limerick, you know, in the first round of the Munster Championship. And, you know, that's the funny thing about Cork. It's maybe that inconsistency that they may get a huge performance against a team like Limerick, but can they back it up the next day? You know, last year we saw against Waterford in the Championship, they were quite poor. Then the next day against Dublin, they were pretty good. And then against Tipperary, you know, they narrowly lost. So I think Kieran Kingston and his management team this year are looking for that consistency. But I think Cork, if they're going to stand any chance, whether it's in league or championship, they do need to get that stability in the back line. You know, we're mentioning, you know, down the spine, the full and centre back positions. You look at the Limericks, even the Kilkennys, the Wexfords, you can almost name their full back and centre back each day. And I think that is a problem. If you can't say who for definite, is it going to be Tim O'Mahony? Is it going to be Bill Cooper? Is it going to be Mark Coleman? You should be certain who your centre back is going out any day. And I think unless Cork get their kind of backline sorted, they're going to be in big trouble, because no doubt about it, in the attack and in the forward line, you've got the Patrick Horgans, the Shane Kingstons, even Shane Barrett, you know, one of the young guys coming into the Cork setup this year. They can add lots and they can put it up to any team, but it's all well and good scoring 20 points up in the forwards and then conceding 3 goals at the back.
Yeah. Jackie, the live game on RTE television at the weekend is obviously Limerick and Tip, which has kind of been a fascinating encounter for the last 2 or 3 years now. You've got just what do seem like perhaps the 2 most talented squads. First 15s, you can make an argument, but in terms of the actual just abundance of talent they have, and they've had obviously some very, very, very good encounters in recent times. You know, a 5:30 throw in the first round of the league for a Limerick team who are going for 3 in a row, you know, won in All-Ireland just before Christmas. have players who were sea swimming for January, February and March rather than any kind of hurling. You don't feel the game is vital to them as much as they'd like to win it. Do you feel it's vital for Tipperary, a team who so much talent, like almost too much talent, I would say, is Liam Sheedy's problem, because he's got all these under-20s coming through, and if he doesn't blood one in last year, and then he's got the next batch coming through this year, and there's an incredible amount of talent there, and he is one manager I think is going to have to use the league to do some rotation and see who could possibly fit in where, who can challenge, the kind of what has been his kind of his best 15 for the last year or two.
Yeah, it's intriguing, Tipperary, looking at him this year, just to think that you have kind of almost two pools of talent. One, an aging pool that are probably have a lot of miles on their clock. Some of the greatest hurlers ever probably came out of Tipperary: Seamus Callanan, Noel McGrath, Pádraig Maher, Brendan Maher. And then you've the other pool at the other end, which is this raft of under-21s are coming through that we haven't really seen. We've seen small little snippets of Paddy Cadell, Robert Byrne, Jake Morris, but probably not enough to say, look, they haven't really been exposed to enough high-level performance games to really make any real examination of them. So it's how will he marry the two of them? For Tipperary to win an All-Ireland this year, they'll need a bit of both. They'll need probably one big kick out of all these guys again, and there's most certainly a kick in them again, but they'll need fresh talent. They'll need Jake Morris to be more consistent this year. They'll maybe need Mark Keogh. Paddy Cadell, really impressed in the bits and pieces I've seen of him. I think there's a role for him within that team. And then what does he do with the other guys? Does he play all those guys together? Does particularly at the back, Pádraig Maher, Brendan Maher, these kind of guys. So it's going to be intriguing how Liam will manage that. He's very loyal to these guys. These guys have served him very well since a minor in 08, to bringing him through to winning that All-Ireland, to come back again, winning another All-Ireland. They're his lieutenants. They've never let him down, Bonner Maher and these lads. But they're probably not all going to be playing, or if they are going to be playing, there's probably a role for maybe 40 minutes and then they're coming off. So I do think Tipperary are the best team out there, equipped if this is managed very well, and I believe Liam Sheedy will do a really good job, and I think he will push Limerick very hard this year. I don't think three in a row has been done in Munster since Tip in the late 80s. It's a very competitive championship, so it'll be very interesting to see. I would imagine Liam Sheedy will play all those under-21s, as much game time in the league, and then in fits and starts throwing your Seamus Callanan, your Pádraig Maher and these guys, and making sure that there's a bit of form, a bit of confidence in them, and it's a perfect league for them to do that.
Yeah, Denis, talking about the Munster Championship being so competitive, and I think even us Leinster folk will admit that it's probably got the more depth, and like Group A of Division 1 is basically the Munster Championship with Clare swapped out for Westmeath and Galway. So I don't think we're going to be seeing Limerick and Tipperary going full bore on Saturday evening by any means, as much as any of us would like to say they will be. But then you've got Cork for Tipperary, and then their third game is Galway. So you would imagine by Galway in week 3, we'll probably have a good idea of perhaps that will be where Liam Sheedy will test drive what he might see as his championship 15.
Yeah, it was interesting. These teams also met in the first round of the league last year when Tipperary were the All-Ireland champions. And I remember that night in Thurles.
Game of two halves.
Game of two halves, yeah, obviously, yeah, absolutely. And like Limerick came back from 10 points down. But the interesting part of that night was Liam Sheedy brought on 4 players in the second half, all of whom were young players. Can we say, like, none of whom would have been given much exposure up to that point. And between the 4 of them, they would have played 10 minutes in the championship later on. But even though Limerick had taken over, we said like in the second half, Liam Sheedy left Seamus Callanan sitting down. So he obviously had taken the view that he wanted to win the match, but he wanted to give those guys game time and blood them and so on. And even though they didn't come through in the championship, I think he knows he needs to accelerate that process in this league. There's no question about that. But the one thing I do think about Saturday night is, I don't think Tipperary can just keep on losing to Limerick and just taking it lightly. I mean, at this stage now, they've had 2 absolute hidings in the championship, in the Munster final in 2019 and the game last November in Cork. 2 thrashings, like 2 of the biggest wins Limerick have ever had over Tip. They've also had 2 league defeats in that time. So, I mean, at what point would Tipperary say, well, actually, we need to beat Limerick, and if it's a league game in May, so what? And if Limerick are not full bore, so what? I think this game is probably more important for Tip. And even from Limerick's point of view, because, like, historically, Limerick would have suffered at Tip's hands over, you know, maybe a 6-7 year period at a time, where, you know, they would just be on the back foot, under Tip's thumb. And now they seem to be inside in Tip's heads. Like, they think, well, now's the time to really kick on and keep the boot down and keep making that racket inside in Tip's head, and, you know, beat Tip again next Saturday, you know, and just put it there in case they meet in the Munster final. Just keep putting those doubts there. So, like, even though everyone thinks this game hasn't got a whole pile riding on it, you just don't know what's going on inside in the camps and what's going on inside in their heads, really.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point Denis makes about, you know, kind of becoming a bogey team for a team that used to, you know, who used to have the whip hand over you, and once you have that kind of dominant role, which I think you probably were kind of, you know, you were quite aware of from your time with Wexford, when you kind of came from being, you know, kind of not one of the dominant teams to winning, you know, multiple All-Irelands in quick succession. You probably have experience of that, where you get the upper hand on a team, and whether it's the league, it's a challenge match, it's a pitch opening, whatever it is, you don't want to give up that whip hand, do you?
And we saw that last year with Limerick, you know, their consistency throughout the year. They were unbeaten in Munster League, in the National League, and in the Championship as well. So confidence breeds confidence too. You know, the more that you win, the more, you know, ambitious you become. And I just think with Tipperary against Limerick, you know, in the last couple of years, I definitely think, you know, Tip have struggled to find that kind of magic formula to, you know, beat or expose some of Limerick weaknesses. You know, we've seen glimpses of it where Galway maybe last year in the semi-final exposed Limerick, and Cork the previous year. But Tip, for some reason, do seem to maybe have this, you know, the need to get this monkey off their back to get a win against Limerick. And I would definitely agree with Denis that, you know, the league is the league, but I do think Liam Sheedy is going to be looking to get more than just a good performance against Limerick. I think he's going to have the ambition, as rightly so, to go down to Limerick to get that victory, and, you know, to set them up nicely, because in the next 6 weeks, each of these teams are going to have 5 games, and yeah, definitely their full eyes are going to be on the championship, but you want to get something out of it, and even if it's just exposing some of these younger guys on the Tip panel to the Limericks, then when it comes to a championship game, they're not going to, you know, freeze on the big stage. You want to adapt them to that situation nice and quickly.
Yeah. If we look quickly at Group B, Jackie, it seems a slightly more damaged group, shall we say. There's teams here who maybe winning a league, or, you know, getting 4 wins in the spring, or sorry, the early summer as it is now, wouldn't do them any harm. Wexford, obviously, as Diarmaid O'Keefe said in that article today, you know, they need to bounce back from what was one of the more pathetic Leinster Championship defences there's ever been. And, you know, they've lost Paddy Foley, and they know this is Davies' last year. It's do or die. You know, Dublin also, you know, need to come back after, you know, they're kind of underwhelming a couple of years. And then Kilkenny went through a shorter winter of angst than usual after not having the year that they would hope to have. But, you know, as you know, you were there long enough, when people are actually putting their heads above the parapet and asking questions about Brian Cody's stewardship, you know that it wasn't an ideal year for Kilkenny. So do you see any team there particularly feeling a desperate need to win a league or to top this group, or will all these teams, barring perhaps Antrim and Laois, just be thinking, we just got to get right for the championship, or we just got to get right for the championship?
I think Wexford and Clare will probably be looking to have a really positive league. Obviously, Wexford, we've touched on the poor year they had last year. It's been a long time since they've been hurling, and they probably just want to get back on the field, get hurling again, get the feel-good factor, and get a couple of wins under the belt. So I do feel, and Davey does always, in fairness, go strong at the league. He's very competitive in it. Wexford Park is a tough place to go. So I do feel they will be really strong on it. I do think, considering what has gone on off the field in Clare, Brian Lohan and his panel will be anxious to, you know, have a positive narrative down there, and try push that behind them and move on, particularly with the training ground facility. You know, and they do have John Conlon and some key guys coming back. So I expect those two teams to really push on. Look, we know what Kilkenny will bring in the league. It'll be ultra competitive. Although it is a kind of a phony war of a league, I do believe Brian, with all due respect to some of the other teams, will probably pick maybe Clare and Wexford to really be the acid test. For some guys that probably he's looking to blood in, he'll be probably throwing them into those games. Adrian Mullen is coming back. He'll probably look to see where he's at in those games, and then probably some more of the key established guys to line him out in those. Look, the big thing for Kilkenny is Colin Fennelly has gone this year, a massive loss on the edge of the square, a presence, experience, and did take the burden off TJ. He is gone, so what are they going to do? Who are they going to look to the edge of the square to carry that mantle? Of course, Adrian Mullen is coming back, but he's still relatively young. So it's up to the likes of Wally Walsh, maybe Billy Ryan to step it up. You know, what's the role going to be for Richie Hogan as well? So there's a few question marks about particularly the Kilkenny attack, and that was the big fall down against Waterford last year in the All-Ireland semi-final when Waterford started to get on top of TJ. We had no one to step up. We had no one to come to the table and help him. And that's what we need to really address. And the second part of it was when Waterford ran at the heart of our defence, athletically, we just couldn't live with them, which is strange considering that the athletes that Kilkenny would have there. So look, they're the kind of things Kilkenny be looking at, but ultimately they'll be looking for a couple of wins, blood a few guys in, test the temperature with Adrian Mullen, and just be ready for the first round of championship when it comes along. Look for the likes of Westmeath and Laois. You know, they'll be looking to get a settled team, to get some new guys in if they possibly can, and to get a bit of confidence and be ready for championship as well. But ultimately, I expect Wexford and Clare to be kind of heading that up.
Yeah, Denis, I know it's something that you've been covering the last few weeks. The issues down in Clare. You would think Brian Lohan, desperate to get on the field, whether an 800-kilometre round trip to Antrim would have been his choice of first round game, but Clare, of all, like, everybody else has kind of been in mothballs. We haven't really thought about, inter-county hurling hasn't been something that's been greatly on our minds, wanting it back, etc. But Clare have been consistently in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, and the soul searching, the navel gazing, the potential legal cases. They don't need it, do they? And I'd say roll on 1 o'clock Sunday for them, I would think, for the hurlers anyway.
Yeah, there's definitely, and there would definitely be a strong element of that, Mikey. But also, I mean, Brian Lohan and his management team and these players were living through this stuff last year. I mean, the kind of unsatisfactory stuff that went on as regards the way the senior hurling team was being dealt with by the county board, which we would have covered in the paper, like that was going on all last year. So they've been through it once already. I mean, I suspect this year will be a lot better. In fact, I'm pretty sure this year will be a lot better from that point of view. And from what I gather, it's already a lot better. And so maybe there was something achieved by what was being reported over the last couple of months and what was being talked about publicly, which, it had been talked about privately for long enough, and it obviously needed to be out there and trashed out in public, maybe to get some kind of a response. So Limerick, look, Clare, obviously they have John Conlon back. I'm not sure. Obviously, look, he's coming back from a serious injury, and he's going to need a bit of time to bed back in. Peter Duggan, who would be a huge help if he was around, not back from his travels as far as I'm aware. And obviously, look, he was a huge player for Clare when they almost got to their All-Ireland final in 2018. Like, there's not, I mean, Brian Lohan or anybody else can wave a magic wand. Like, the players we saw last year is more or less the panel he has. And, they were excellent against Wexford. They played well for 3/4 of the Waterford game in the quarter final. But I think Brian Lohan will be looking for more consistency for sure. And, and he'd be looking for a less stressful year on a number of levels. But as you say, I'm sure he'd be pleased to be back on the field.
Yeah. Okay, as I said, we won't go through county by county. We have neither the time nor I think league is league. Ursula, you won the bingo there. You were the first person to say it, by the way. So you're right, league is league. So we're not going to go through every team. But what is interesting, Ursula, obviously, is the new rules on cynical fouling, and this is why it is going to make the league very important, because for players, for managers, for spectators, and most importantly for referees, this is where they get to trial this, and it's arguably the biggest change in the rules of hurling, you could argue, ever. Well, certainly it's up there. To just refresh people's memory, for a cynical foul inside the 21 or the D, player will be given a yellow card, which is effectively a black card in football, and a penalty will be awarded. I think everybody has a mixture of misgivings and kind of hope for this. Ursula, where do you sit on it now, as it's only a few days away?
Because we're all eager to see how it's going to unfold in the league, and obviously it's been trialled this year. And the one thing I would say, firstly, I think it's going to add a huge amount of pressure on the referees as well, because there's going to be, you know, a referee's interpretation. And as you said, you know, certain things like, you know, pulling of an opponent's hurl is not deemed a cynical foul. That's still considered a technical foul. So it's, you know, it's deciding, is it inside the 20-meter line? And I would feel there is going to be that added pressure on the referee. Like, the one thing I would just say is, I hope, you know, we're not getting to a stage where we're going to completely sanitize down the games, where we take the physicality out. Without a doubt, cynicism probably has been creeping into the game in the last couple of years. You know, we saw a number of incidents last year, you know, Danny Sutcliffe on Paddy Purcell in the Leinster Championship. We saw Paddy Smith rugby tackling Shane Kingston in the qualifiers, in the qualifiers. Hugh Lawler and Niall Burke with the hurl in the Leinster final. So it is creeping in. You know, I just hope it's not taking the element of the physicality out of the game. You know, defensively, teams are going to have to be that bit smarter, because some forwards, you know, I know myself, if I think maybe I can win an easy free or go down lightly, maybe that will creep in, and you don't want to see that either, because, you know, you see someone like JJ Delaney back in the day, you know, got that incredible hook on Seamus Callanan. Like, that's brilliant, smart defensive play, but you don't want the other side of it, where a forward is going down softly and the ref gives a penalty, and then a black card to the defender. So I definitely think it's going to be a huge talking point in the next couple of weeks. I just hope it doesn't become so, you know, that we get so consumed by it that we're not talking about the games and the hurling. That I hope it's not the focal point for every game, but definitely it's going to be a controversial topic. And it probably was, you know, people have been looking for this change, so I think maybe we have to be open to it as well.
Yeah. Jackie, I know you've been reborn as a bear on the edge of the square there, full forward. So you're probably welcoming this rule now, but you did have a slight reputation as one of the more physical cornerbacks in the game during your inter-county career. I wonder how you would have welcomed this were you still playing.
Look, I would have been protesting against it and standing with my picket up outside Croke Park to make sure, and gathering up JJ and a few defenders around the country to put a barricade not to let it through. But look, it's true, and it's, as Ursula said, it's definitely going to be interesting. There's a lot in it, and I suppose probably the thing that I would, you know, like the pulling of a jersey or the pulling of a hurl is not in it. And I know as a defender, one of the most cynical things you can do is the forward gets the ball, it's all his jersey, and that's just a noting and a free. So maybe that's something, if they are looking at it later on in the year, that maybe it's going to be included if this is the way forward. And cynicism has been in the game and always will be in the game. I suppose the pressure that's going to come on referees, that Ursula said, when a forward rounds a defender inside the 20, and if there's a pull down or a trip by the defender, the referee has to make the call. You know, there's a lot to consider. The location of it, right? Is it inside the 20? That's fine. Say this is out in the corner. Was there a covering defender? How many covering defenders would that lad have got back? Would he got a hook? Would he got a block? There's just a lot of decisions to be made by that referee in those kind of couple of seconds. So it's going to add entertainment. It's going to add talking points. It's going to add more pressure and more decisions for the referee. I'm kind of looking forward to just see what way it is, because there's a lot of talk. And maybe there won't be maybe this, because I'm trying to think, like Ursula listed out, there was probably only a handful of really cynical tackles, you know, and a few that Ursula alluded to. Not all of them were inside the 20 or inside the D. So maybe this won't be as big as a talking point or a bugbear for people as we're making it out, or maybe at the end of the league it'll be as bad as VAR, but I'm hoping it won't be that bad. But I'm just looking forward to let's roll it out in the league. I know it's in for the championship, but let's see where it takes us. If it takes out the cynicism to some degree in the game, that's a result for me. But look, I would just to kind of double back on what Ursula said, you know, the physicality, that is really, really important to nurture that and to make sure that exists in the game, because that's just so attractive to the supporters.
Yeah, and Denis, if Ursula won bingo for the League is League, I'll win my own personal bingo for saying the law of unintended consequences, which I bring up a lot because it is something in the GAA. The games are so dynamic. There are coaches and managers looking at every single implication and workaround to any rule. they're not being cynical. They're just trying to win matches. And I always, whenever a new rule comes in the GAA, my fear is it might work, but it could set off a chain reaction somewhere else where we could end up with an even bigger problem. And as Ursula and Jackie have pointed out, the game hasn't been plagued by these incidents. There's just been a handful of very high profile ones. Now, you don't want them, but at the same time, you do fear what a rule change like this can do to the game overall.
Yeah, I don't fear, to be honest, Mikey. I think this is long overdue. I think there's been far too much denial and delusion about cynical play in hurling. And as Jackie says, like, cynical play, it's an all contact sports. It's an all field sports. You know, there's a sin bin in rugby. You have rules in soccer for cynical play. It doesn't eliminate it. It just makes people decide: am I prepared to take the punishment? What's the percentage call here for me and for my team? You know, we're still going to have cynical play with these rules. I mean, so teams are going to decide: is it worth bringing the guy down? Is it worth taking a chance that they'll fluff the penalty? Can we survive for 10 minutes with 14 men? So all those calls will still be made by players and by management teams. Like this stuff, I would dispute the contention that there's only been a handful. There's been way more than a handful. John Fogarty, an examiner yesterday, was able to illustrate 10 from last summer's championship from last autumn's championship without even exhausting the list. There was 2 in the Ireland final by Limerick that were just classic, and even one of them wouldn't even qualify under these rules, but it was a goal scoring chance. Declan Hannon brought a guy down 35 yards out. So this has been going on for 16 years. I remember in 2005 they tried to bring in a sin bin in hurling, or black card in hurling, because even back then they realised that this was a creeping issue. So 16 years of denial has left us where we are now, where it was just creeping and creeping and creeping, and hurling people saying it's a football thing, it's not a hurling thing. This is not a problem. There's no need nothing to see here. I remember when they brought in the sin bin for a trial in the 2005 league. Remember the very first weekend of matches, Jackie may have been playing actually, it was Warford against Kilkenny in the National League. John Milan was fouled 8 times in that match, and JJ Delaney was sin bin for bringing down Milan, going through one goal. So like this stuff has been there for 16 years, and we've been in denial, and it's just been deflected. Hurling hasn't got a problem. Hurling has an issue. Now, if the reformers are wrong, and if we're all wrong, and there is no issue, well then these rules won't be applied. The referee won't have to apply these rules if there is no issue. So let's see what the next few weeks bring. I've no doubt that it's institutionalized now in teams' thinking. It's institutionalized in their build-up. Players know exactly what their managers and teammates would want if a player's gone through on goal. They want an intervention, and it's across the board. When Tip beat Cork last year in the championship in the Gaelic grounds, if you remember Jason Ford's goal, which was a key goal in the second half, Jason Ford went along the end line, cut inside and scored. And people in Cork were saying, why the hell wasn't he brought down? Now that would be a sin bin, and that would be a 10 minutes. But people in Cork were saying, why the hell wasn't he brought down? So like that's the way supporters are thinking. That's the way everyone in the game thinks now, because it's become ingrained. It's just become ingrained that in certain situations you expect your defender to bring someone down. And that's not manliness, that's not physicality, that's not courageous, that's just cynicism. And people hate the word. I think people hate the word more than they hate the act. I think the language is nearly more offensive than the actual act. So people expect all these things from their players, but they hate the word cynicism. So look, I think we just need to wake up and confront this thing. If it's not there, these rules won't be applied. If it's there, let's see how teams react when there's a few sin bins, handed out.
Okay. I'm curious, Jackie, were you played in that game in 2005? And if you can remember, what was the reaction to JJ Delaney getting the ignominy of the first sin binning in hurling?
I think I do remember. I think it was very early, Denis, too, wasn't it? I think like the game was 10 minutes old, and JJ was getting an early shower, and it was a freezing day. He wasn't even warm up, so I think he was happy enough to be heading for the showers. That's all I think he was. Yeah. But yeah, I think I remember that day. And I remember another day, myself and Tommy as well ended up in a row with Seamus Pendergast, Snow and Kelly, and we all got the sin bin as well. It was really, really frustrating because you're waiting all weekend for the game, and then 10-15 minutes and you're gone out of the game. You're more annoyed with yourself going, God, I'm gone now. I can't even poke a ball out to sit in the sideline now. And that was kind of it. But it never got through over that. But one thing I will say, it will put a premium on the real direct forwards, your Conor Whelans, your Alan Cadigans, Desi Hutchinsons, because these guys get the ball, have pace, have unbelievable footwork. So they're the type of lads that will really be taking their men on. And also, likewise, it puts a premium on elite mobile defenders like Sean Finn and Cottle Bard and that. So it changes up the dynamic of managers, of how they approach games and the type of guys that they're going to pick. Because if you can expose someone and they're going to have to pull you down or chip you down and they're gone in the sin bin, they're the type of lads that are probably going to get the nod.
We're just out of time now, lads, but I just wanted to ask you, Ursula, your view on the Camogie Association's potential U-turn on not following the lead of the GAA and the LGFA and going with a split season, and instead decided to go league, club, championship. And we think it's 82% of the players were against this idea, so they've finally listened and they've gone back to the drawing board. Are you confident that the Camogie players will get some form of a split season?
I suppose the general feeling out there is that from an inter-county player perspective, they're hoping the split season will come into effect. I suppose personally, I'm still playing at club level, and I suppose I still have a vested interest in my club involvement, because we're still currently awaiting to play a Leinster Club Championship from 2020. So there's the other side of the argument where you can say the club players that have been waiting the last 6 months to play a game, if our games are pushed out or if it doesn't happen, then we won't get games till the kind of September, October of this year. So I can see both sides. It's just unfortunate that, you know, the Camogie Association are making the headlines again for the wrong reasons. And I suppose one thing that's probably frustrating people is maybe the lack of communication, and then also the dual players obviously have a huge concern. If the current plans go ahead, how can you decide, are you going to play club camogie or intercounty football? So I think this week they're going out to the clubs to look for the club players' view, because the vote that was done was based on the intercounty players. So it will be interesting to see. As a club player, I know it will be very tough that you go nearly a full year without playing a game. So I think it's not as straightforward as some people are saying, but I just think we have to be at the centre of it. We have to really just look out for the players, both at a club perspective and an inter-county level, and, you know, try find the best solution, because it's just a bit of a mess at the moment and it's frustrating, and it's just irking that, again, the Camogie is making the headlines for the wrong reasons. So I just hope the best solution is found across the board for both club and county players.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Just a reminder to everybody, the RTE Soccer and Rugby podcasts are out to listen to. And this week's We Become Heroes with Marie Crowe is with Paul Flynn, the former Dublin footballer, who tells an interesting story about how his career was nearly stopped before it started when he ran through a patio door and sliced his right shin. He was told he'd never play sport again, so he did. He won 4 All-Stars in a row, so fair play to him. Then just to mention the GA coverage this weekend, obviously we have the Limerick tip match live on RTE2 television, I think from 5:30 throw-in on Saturday, and we'll have live commentaries on Saturday and Sunday Sport on Radio 1, and live blogs and match reports on the RTE website and news app. And isn't it great to be able to say that again after our few months off? So thank you to Ursula and to Denis and to Jackie, and we'll catch you all again next week. Thank you very much.
Crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. He hits it. It's over the bar.